Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Sarah and I'm so excited to have you here with me today. We are going to be talking about one of the coolest, cutest animals in Australia. Now, Australia is home to some really unique, incredible animals. Today we're going to focus on one that we might find sitting at the tippy top of a eucalyptus tree munching on leaves. If you think we might be talking about koalas today, you're exactly right. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Like we already mentioned, koalas are found in Australia, and that's the only place in the world we find them, in Australia and on a couple little islands off the coast of Australia. Because this is the only place in the world that they're found, we say they are endemic to Australia. We're going to talk more about this in just a little bit. Now, koalas are kind of a unique mammal. They belong to a group of mammals that we call marsupials. Marsupials are a group of mammals where the females have a pouch on their belly that they use to carry their offspring. Koalas don't have any very close relatives. They're the only living member of their family. Their closest relative is actually the wombat, and there are lots of other types of marsupials as well that koalas are a little bit more distantly related to, like kangaroos and possums and even Tasmanian devils. Aside from being really cute, koalas are very well known for their gray fluffy fur and those large rounded ears they have on the top of their head. Compared to other marsupials, koalas are kind of a medium size. Males can be much larger than females, and a large male koala weighs about 30 pounds. Now, we mentioned before that koalas live in Australia. That would be their range. Their habitat is forests and woodlands. We find them really commonly in eucalyptus forests. We'll talk more about that later. But in these forests where they live, we're not usually going to find koalas on the ground because koalas are arboreal. And that means they live up in the trees. That makes them very different than their wombat cousin we mentioned before, which lives on the ground. Because koalas spend so much time up in the trees, they have adaptations that are used for climbing and navigating throughout all those high up tree branches. Let's take a look at some of those adaptations now. To grip into the tree bark while they're climbing, koalas have sharp, hooked claws that are perfect for grabbing onto tree trunks and branches. And speaking of their fingers, well, they do have 5 of them on each hand like most of us do. Instead of having one thumb, 2 of their fingers work like thumbs and create these perfect pinchers that allow them to grab onto tree branches. To hoist themselves up into the trees, they need really strong arms and really strong leg muscles so that they can climb speedy up those trees. One of the reasons that it's important koalas are good climbers is because their food is up in the trees. Remember how we said before that koalas are typically found in forests and woodlands? They're often found in eucalyptus forests because eucalyptus trees have some of their favorite foods. Koalas are herbivores, which means they are plant eaters, but more specifically, they are folivores, which means they specialize in eating leaves from plants. And while they do like to eat lots of different types of eucalyptus leaves, they'll eat leaves from other trees as well. Koalas are what we call specialist feeders, which I like to think of as them being really picky eaters. Specialist feeders typically have one or just a few different types of food that they eat, and that's it. The opposite of that would be a generalist feeder. That would be like an animal who will eat just about anything they can find. They are not picky eaters. But remember, koalas are specialists. They're very picky. The leaves that make up a koala's diet are really low in nutrients, which is part of the reason that koalas are so slow and sleepy. Because they don't have very much energy to spare, koalas can sleep upwards of 20 hours per day, which is a really long time. Now, when they're not sleeping and when they're not eating, koalas are typically hanging out alone. Koalas are what we call solitary, which means they don't like to live in groups with other koalas. They would much rather be by themselves. Now, sometimes it might look like we've got a pair of koalas together, but usually what we're seeing is a mom and her offspring. Young koalas will stay with their mom until they're more than a year old, and by that time, they kind of look like adults. So it could look like they're hanging out in a group, but really, it's just a mom and her offspring. Now, adult koalas are pretty territorial, especially the males. They don't like to share their territory with other koalas. Males have a big gland on their chest, a scent gland, and they'll use that scent gland to mark their territory to keep other koalas away. When young koalas are first starting off and they're going out on their own in search of food and their own territory, they may travel through other koalas' territories until they find their own. Let's stay on the topic of young koalas for a moment. Remember how we said before that koalas are a type of marsupial, which means that the females have a pouch on their belly that they use to raise their offspring. Now, a baby koala, like most marsupials, is called a joey, and also like most marsupials, the koala gives birth to a joey that's really small and undeveloped and is actually about the size of a jelly bean. A koala's gestation, which is the amount of time that she's pregnant, is only about 30 days. So when that teeny tiny little baby is born, it crawls across its mom's fur, it gets right into that pouch, and it stays there. And while it's in there, it's drinking milk, it's growing, it's slowly developing fur and starting to look more and more like a koala. Koala joeys will stay in their mom's pouch for about 7 months before they really start coming out and adventuring. By that time, they've grown, they've developed, they've got their fur, and eventually, when they outgrow the pouch, they ride around on their mom's back. Remember we said before that young koalas can stay with their mom for more than a year, and when that time comes, the young koalas go off on their own to find their own territories, potentially find a mate, and the whole process starts over again. Now, remember how we said before that koalas are endemic to Australia. It's the only place in the world they're found. Now, that's pretty cool and unique, but it can also be a little bit challenging because if something happens to that area where an endemic species is native to, they're in a lot of danger, right? There's nowhere else in the world that we find that animal, so we need to protect the place that it lives. Koalas are threatened pretty heavily by deforestation and by other effects to their habitat, such as growing wildfires. If you want to learn more about these threats to koalas, especially with wildfires, and how you can make a difference, be sure to click the link below. That is also where you will find games, activities, quizzes, projects, and more all about koalas. I hope we see you guys next time to learn more about some incredible animals. Thank you so much for joining me today. Bye!